coming back to us on the 22nd. I know you've got the list of things, so I'm just going to ask what I think is a pretty simple one for all of the people who are listening to this meeting. We've seen a lot of, video footage of police down south who have this military style gear, and I've never seen that in Juneau. And I'm curious if JPD has that kind of equipment, and if so, how and when does it get used?
Chief Mercer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Treem, obviously the police department used different tools and equipment that may look like it's militaristic as far as it goes. We participate in the 1033 program. It's a federal program. And it's just on top of my head, the last thing that I recall that we got from the military and we use is our mobile incident command. We got that through Homeland Security funds, and we also were provided SWAT gear, and also they issued us our rifles, which I could tell you those rifles were back in the early 2000s, and we have since replaced them. So what you're seeing is what we use. There's times and places for those type of tools if we had them, or vehicles, but we don't have all that type of stuff you're seeing down there.
Ms. Treem, you have a follow-up?
Just one more thing, maybe a suggestion for both JPD and our staff. I think as we go through this process, it would be helpful, since there's so much interest from the public, if we could get all of this information eventually kind of coalesced into one place and maybe put online somewhere.
Thank you, Ms. Treem. And that leads us to Mr. Edwardson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before my question, could I follow up on Ms. Gladaszewski's question?
Certainly.
And I might have missed it because I was taking notes. I would like to see the Juneau Police Department use of force policy. I'm familiar with use of force policies. I've followed them in my career for 20 years. So I am familiar. I am familiar with use of force continuum and any number of different things. So I would like to see, and I'd like the Assembly to see, the JPD use of force policy. Is that possible?
Chief Mercer.
Certainly, we can have discussions about how we proceed with department policy. I'm open to have that discussion.
Follow up?
Certainly, Mr. Edwardson.
May I see the printed use of force policy?
Chief Mercer.
At this time, no. But certainly, I'm more than open to have a discussion with you as far as how we proceed with that.
And I think the discussion would be working through the city manager's office to have our input from the city attorneys about what we can and can't release. And then the appropriate place would be to give that to the city manager's office that then go through you, as opposed to coming directly from us. It would go through them. I believe is how it would work.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right,
so
go ahead, Mr. Edwardson.
Oh, I was just going to move on to my next question unless you had something on that.
I was just going to add to that. If any member of the Assembly wants to see the policy or talk about the policy, you obviously need to contact Chief Mercer and Deputy Chief Mercer and have a little tighter conversation, it sounds like. So, Mr. Edwardson, back to you.
Okay. And having been in charge of law enforcement people and actually qualifying them and certifying them to carry weapons and do law enforcement, I do know that regardless of how high of quality of recruitment that you do, people change over time, and you don't necessarily screen everybody out and you end up getting complaints. So I'm just kind of building up to a question, and the question could easily be answered probably in the committee of the whole meeting, but I want to make sure that you're prepared for it. I'm getting more reports actually at a pretty rapid pace about complaints against use of force, and these aren't like kneeling on somebody's neck or anything like that, but placing hands on people, manhandling people, perhaps doing more dangerous than necessary maneuvers in cars to stop people. One of the things in the use of force policy that I'm accustomed to is it goes, or it went, I don't know if it still does, officer presence, verbal command, soft empty hand, hard empty hand, intermediate weapon, deadly force. So in officer presence, you stood a certain way to be non-menacing. And I'm getting reports of people being stopped and asked questions with the police officer having their hand on the gun, which isn't part of the interview position, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to see the use of force policy. And again, this could be answered in the next meeting, but I'm interested in seeing all the records, or at least within the records retention schedule of complaints of use of force violations against the Juneau Police Department. Would that be possible?
Through Madam Mayor, Mr. Edwardson, again, I think we would have to have discussion with our law department as far as how we proceed. Personnel files are typically something that we do not share with the public because it's personnel, but we could certainly provide information on complaints that we have received and opened up an investigation on to be able to show exactly what that might have been.
Thank you, Chief Mercer, and thank you both for coming and talking to us tonight.
Okay, then we have Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much for being here with us tonight. I look forward to speaking about this more on the 22nd, so thank you for coming back then. Ms. Gladaszewski kind of gave you the gamut of questions, so I think I have one or two that I'd hope you'd be able to answer tonight, but I'll say that I would look forward to hearing more about how we're currently tracking the demographics of victims of crimes, tracking demographics of in use of force, reporting. I'd like to know tonight, what are the policies, if you can answer this, if you feel like that's reasonable, what are the policies and procedures currently in place with body cameras? Since I know we've been using those for a long time, are there consequences for failing to use them?
Chief Mercer.
Madam Mayor, thank you, Ms. Hughes Candies. There is consequences for our officers not complying with policy, specifically body worn camera. I mean, certainly we have a review process that our supervisors will go periodically review body worn cameras to see whether or not if they're working and how they're working, and also reviewing what the officer might have been doing out in the field. So in that way, we're trying to do some quality control to assure that our personnel is doing it. If they're not using it, which I don't think that's the case, I'll tell you that in the since 2017, we have evolved quite a ways with it, and I think our officers are seeing how useful a body worn camera can be in one, capturing evidence, and two, helping them when somebody files a complaint against them and it may not be true. So to answer your question, yes, there's consequences, not just solely in the body worn policy, but in our policies and procedures. I'm following through with policies.
And